Hi, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started since it's 8 o'clock. Huh? Is the mic on? I thought it. First of all, thank you for coming out today for our first Breakfast with Buckingham for 2016. This is a quarterly presentation that we like to put on just regarding hot topics that affect your business. Today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, and we have three lovely panelists here. First, Brett Kimmell from Kimmell Cybersecurity. He's kind of our technical expert in this field. Neil Bhagat is an attorney in our employment group, and he's going to talk about some of the employment policies that you should have in place to kind of combat against some of these issues that you may have. And then Justin Greenfelder in our litigation group, he's going to probably scare you a little bit and let you know what happens when cybersecurity goes bad. So I'm going to go ahead and give the mic over to these guys.
Good morning, everybody. See if this works. I can only see that slide right there. I can barely read it. So if I turn this way, just trying to read my slides. So a little bit about myself. I've got several certifications. Most notable thing up there is probably the bottom, Black Hat Abu Dhabi. I took a trip there to present malware. Can you hear me? Do I need to lift this up? I don't think it goes up. Does it go up? Grab it out of there if you want. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so Black Hat Abu Dhabi, we wrote malware that allowed us to make entries into an accounting system remotely. I don't know. I'm sure all of you guys have accounting systems. We wrote it for Great Plains, but we could have done it for any ERP system. Okay? All right, so today we're going to talk about 5 ways to breach a system and signs that your system might be breached. By far, the easiest way to breach a system is to guess a password. How many people here have 7-character passwords? Or 8? Okay. 50 employees or more? If you have over 50 employees, I can guarantee you that somebody's using a top 20 password in your system. Do you have remote access to email? Web-based? Do you have a VPN? Yeah, there's 2 easy ways into your system. Do you have password policies that require complex passwords? Even if you do, a password like Spring16 meets those requirements. And passwords are everywhere. You have operating systems, applications, VPNs, networking equipment, web applications. Anytime you have a password for remote access, you should have a second factor of authentication, because hackers are persistent. They will try over and over and over. And what we do when we test the system is we'll get a list of your employees from LinkedIn, and then we'll try different user ID schemes. And when we get locked out of an account, then we know we have your user ID scheme. So then we just go user by user and try top 20, and then we'll try variants thereof. And we're usually successful in companies who don't have a security program in place. How many people have VPN access in here? Do you have 2-factor authentication for that? Just a password and your user ID? You're at risk. Using the same password on multiple systems, and I said local admin accounts. Your admins at your company have two levels of admin access. They have domain admin access, and then each P has a local admin. Most companies we go into, the local admin account and password is the same on every PC in the company. So if we can breach one PC, we can easily jump from the next to the next to the next, and then we can escalate that to domain admin. Your domain admins shouldn't be logging on to a local PC using their domain admin account either. When you log into a PC, your passwords are cached, saved on that PC. They're hashed. Think of it as like one-way encryption. So that long string of characters is stored on a PC. If we can get access to a machine, we can start dumping those hashes, and then we crack those. And we'll do a dictionary attack where we'll take that hash, and we'll compare it to the 217 million hashes we already have, and look for a match. If it matches, we have your password. If that doesn't work, then we can try brute force attack, where we try every combination, and then we'll get your password. And that's why 7 or 8 character passwords, they're so short, they're easy to crack. You know, we recommend 12, 15 characters, 20 characters for an administrative account. And the domain admins in your company should never log on to a PC with their domain admin account. When hackers get into your system, they want the sysadmin account. That sysadmin account should only be on the sysadmin's PC and never on a user's PC. And all local user admin accounts should be different with different passwords. Wi-Fi. How many people have Wi-Fi? Everybody. Do you just need a password to access your Wi-Fi? Or do you need a user ID and a password? Because if you just have a pre-shared key, which is that password, we can intercept that packet out of the air using a tool called AirCrack, and I'll talk about tools a little bit later. And it's basically a hash, and we can crack that hash, and then we can get onto your Wi-Fi, which puts us onto your network. The other thing we can do is we can set our computer up as an evil twin. So if our signal is stronger than your Wi-Fi access point, your employee will connect to our computer. So we can do that from your parking lot. So you want to use client-side certificates when you have Wi-Fi, so they're authenticating against your Active Directory and not just needing a password to get into Wi-Fi. Storing passwords in Excel files, Word files, we see that all the time when we go into companies. So at a company about 2 years ago, and the CFO had all of their banking information, all passwords, user IDs, in an Excel file, and it wasn't password protected. So we would have access to the banking information. You can use the encryption in Excel to password protect your file, but there are applications you can buy for like $30 that will crack that. So if you need to store passwords, store them in something like KeePass, which is an encrypted password application. You can put it on your phone or your computer. Put a 15-character or longer password into that. The goal here for hackers is to get sysadmin, and they start with somebody's credentials, whoever it might be in your organization. If we can trick you into trying to authenticate somewhere using your Windows credentials, we can grab that user ID and we can grab that hash password. And the last example on this slide is Adobe Documents with remote embedded video. So have you ever opened up an Adobe document and a little pop-up comes up that says warning, this has remote content? And you say cancel or okay. Have you guys ever noticed that before? What's happening is your Windows user ID and hash password are being sent automatically to authenticate. It's a built-in function of that document object model. So if we can send email and Adobe document to somebody and he has that, we can point that to try to authenticate to one of our remote servers, and then we can get your user ID and your hash password. Then we can crack that password, and if you have email or VPN, then we can get back into your system. Any questions on passwords? So this is just a quick sketch, but if you look at it, this is a real simple network. So we go into a company, have passwords written on a Post-it note, passwords hashed and stored on devices. And think about it. Who has physical access to your computer? And unless your notebook is encrypted, if somebody has physical access to that, I can just put a USB stick inside, boot an operating system up on that USB stick, and do a password hash dump from that computer and be out of there in 5 minutes. Passwords stored in Excel file on a server, Word documents, whatever it might be. Wi-Fi passwords sent over there. Default passwords on networking equipment, and we see that a lot too. Does anybody remember healthcare.gov, that breach? It's default password, user ID. Then we have that pointing at the cloud, the internet. I'm sure a lot of you guys use cloud-based vendors for different applications. Before you use a third-party vendor, you really need to check them out. You should find out if they have some kind of ISO 27001 certification or have a SOC 2, which is IT controls. If they don't have that, at the bare minimum, you should have them fill out a vendor security questionnaire, which covers all the main points of those two control sets, so the ISO and SOC 2. If you're just signing up and they have your data, and we did an information security assessment for a company in Cleveland a couple weeks ago. They have multiple cloud vendors, and one of them it's not SOC 2, it's not ISO 27001 certified. And just looking at the application, there's so many things wrong with it that the information in it is vulnerable. That didn't work. There we go. So vulnerabilities. Every application, every operating system has vulnerabilities. So those are, in summary, flaws in code that can be taken advantage of, where we can get little snippets of code to run in the operating system or in the application. 7,000 of these were discovered in 2014, 6,000 in 2015. Prior years is around 3,500, 3,800. And what's interesting is the last 2 years, the Mac operating systems had the most vulnerabilities discovered. My theory on that is because Macs are becoming more and more every day in companies. People are using them more for business, whereas 5, 6, 7 years ago, nobody was using Mac at companies. Now they're using them. So the hackers are concentrating on those. They're finding the vulnerabilities and writing exploit code on those. When somebody finds a vulnerability in a system, exploit code is usually written within 30 days. They do it quick and they do it fast. And not every exploit will give you remote access into a system. Some exploits will only give you information about the system, but nonetheless, it's a security issue. The other thing is, these are only well-known applications. So you're talking about Apple, Microsoft, Adobe. They're not custom or unknown applications, and it's not web applications. We'll get to that in a second. What am I doing on time? What time is it? Is it 1:15 already? All right, I only have 20 minutes, so I've got to hurry up here. So here's you guys can't see this, but you can see it in your handout. These are vulnerabilities listed by application for well-known operating systems and applications. And Apple's at the top of the list 2 years in a row. All right, so second way to breach a system, phishing with malicious attachment. So if you get an email from anybody, even somebody in your company, and you're not expecting it, be very leery of the attachment. Because we just talked about remote access into email systems. Your employees are using 7 or 8 character passwords, and some of them are using a top 20 password or a variant of that. We could easily breach somebody's email account, put a malware attachment onto it, send it to you. You think it's coming from an employee, so you click it, and say, send it to, I don't know anybody's names here. I'll send it to Bill. And Bill, I say, Bill, here's your raise, 10%, good job, check out the document. And make it sound like it's coming from the HR person. And he clicks it. Next thing you know, we have remote access into his system. Then we start doing password, hash dumps, and then we're in. So you have to be very careful of that. and I'm sure you guys see these. Your spam filters, malware filters may catch some of these, but they're not going to catch all of these. We can send a payload in encrypted so it's not detected, and then it self-decrypts once it's inside of your system if you click on the attachment. So if you get an email, be leery if it's not expected. Third way, malicious websites. If your system is vulnerable, so if you're not patching your system on a regular basis, you're vulnerable to what we call a drive-by download, where you visit a website, code is downloaded in the background that you don't even see, and it's malware, it's malicious. It reports back out to us, and then we can get what's called a reverse shell on your machine. And it's basically, you guys have all seen the C prompt on a computer. So we basically get the prompt on our computer, and then we can start running commands on your computer, doing password hash dumps, just because you went to a website that has malicious code. So you have to be very careful about where you go. And there are tools out there that can help prevent employees from going to malicious websites, but they're not 100% because they don't know about every malicious website out there. And the other thing is, legitimate websites can be hacked to have malicious code in them. For USBs, if you ever find a USB just laying around, throw it away. Do not put it in your computer. One of the things when we do pen tests is we'll drop USBs in a parking lot. If somebody brings it into a building and they put it into a computer, it reports back to us, and we can get a reverse shell on your computer just by you putting that USB drive. And people can buy these off the internet for $40. This one right here, it's $40 on the internet. Comes preloaded. And now there's a USB with an app on it that when you plug it in, it formats your hard drive. Yeah. So they're not even trying to steal anything, they're just trying to cause damage. Web application hack. And I mentioned that earlier. A lot of companies have custom web applications built to provide information to customers or to suppliers or maybe to another division in their company. If it's custom code, there's probably vulnerabilities in it. And two of the top ways to hack a web application are SQL injection, which allows us to retrieve data from any attached database, delete it, modify it, or download it. You guys remember LinkedIn? When LinkedIn got hacked like 4 years ago? They used this and they downloaded all the users' hashed passwords, and that's why you had to change your password 4 years ago. You guys don't remember that. And then cross-site scripting is a way to get code to run on somebody else's browser session, so you can steal their credentials if they open up the page when you did the cross-site scripting. And there's other ways to do this too, but these are two of the basic ways. All right, so signs of a possible breach. The first 5 of these are pretty basic, and it's really kind of, individual user or home user. Your CPU is running like crazy. You check your performance, and your bandwidth is really high. Unknown files keep showing up in your boot partition. You get calls or emails back from contacts saying, hey, did you mean to send me this PDF file? Because I have no idea why I have drawings for this building. Lots of pop-ups regarding PC security. Have you guys ever seen it pops up and it says, you have a virus, please click here to scan your computer, but it's not the antivirus your company uses? Don't ever click that. It's malware. And then the last 3 are probably not going to notice unless you have a security program in place. Large amounts of data in the wrong places. When somebody's stealing data from a company, they like to consolidate it to one area before they upload it and take it out of your company. Unusual outbound traffic. So traffic on some obscure port. There's over 65,000 ports that TCP/IP you'll use to communicate. Anomalies in privileged user account activity. So your admin's logging in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know that there's no way that person is up at 3 o'clock working. So you need to keep track of privileged account access and when they're going into the system. And all of that stuff can be logged, it can be collected, and it can be analyzed manually, or you can do it using different tools like a security information and event management system. So we have one we use. It's called Alien Vault. It's a Gartner top quadrant SIM. I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't go. Oh, I want to show you this slide. This is a screenshot of a tool called Kali Linux. It is a hacking system built on a Linux operating system. It comes preloaded with hundreds, literally hundreds of tools that we can use to hack into a system. And this is free for everybody, and we use it for good. We just don't hack into systems unless somebody pays us to do it. But bad guys can use this. But I also have to say, there are companies out there, and I talked about vulnerabilities, and we discover them, and we give them a number, and assign a description to them. There are vulnerabilities in operating systems and applications out there that good guys don't know about yet, that the bad guys know about. They'll write their own exploit code. There's a company in Italy called the A-Team. Has anybody ever heard of that? No? Their business is to write exploit code for what we call 0 days, which are vulnerabilities in the system that were just discovered. So they discover vulnerabilities, they write exploit code, and then they'll sell them to governments or large corporations. But they don't tell anybody about these vulnerabilities. They use them to make money. And some of these exploit codes, they'll go for $100,000, $200,000, $250,000. But if you Google the A-Team Italy, you'll find out that about a year ago they got hacked, and all of their proprietary, they got hacked. All their proprietary exploits were then dumped onto the internet. So, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so that's all I had. Do you guys have any questions before I turn this back over? Go ahead. Oh, bad guy profile? Okay, well, it depends, because you have young guys who have nothing better to do but get on their computers and try to break into systems. But they're pretty low level, using low level, something like that, yeah. But if you have information that somebody wants and you're a target, you're talking about China, North Korea, Eastern Europe, maybe another company in the United States who wants to find information out about your company. If you're in manufacturing, maybe they want your proprietary drawings. Maybe they want your pricing information. If you have automation on your shop floor, your PLCs, a lot of those were written a long time ago, and they have a lot of backdoors in them, so they can change your manufacturing process. Did you guys see the steel plant in Bulgaria? There was a steel plant in Bulgaria a few weeks ago that got shut down because of hackers. They shut the whole thing down. Did I answer your question? Sort of? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can. Okay, well, let me see if this answers your question. You can put a honeypot up, so it's basically a server that has vulnerabilities, and they'll find it when they're what we call footprinting and fingerprinting your network. So before somebody starts to hack your system, they'll gain as much information about your system as they can. Okay, they'll find out all your associated IP addresses, the firewall you're running, the firmware version on it, does it have vulnerabilities, doesn't it? So they'll get this information list on you. You can put a honeypot out there, and they're not going to know that this honeypot is, and there's special features in a honeypot where you can record everything that's happening. There's this one guy who went into a honeypot, and he was from China, and while he was on this PC, he decided he was going to log into one of his cloud-based file shares. So he entered his, and it was HTTP, I believe, and he entered in his user ID and his password. So now that's all that traffic's recorded in the honeypot. So now we had his user ID and password for his file share. So yeah, you can set them up. As far as attacking back, we should ask these guys about the legalities of that, because there are laws laws about hacking into somebody's system. So you just don't want to. Yeah, go ahead. Well, we use SharePoint/OneDrive, but we also have two-factor authentication. So you can't get into our system unless you have our user ID, password, and the 6-digit code that's only good for 60 seconds until a new one's required to get into the system. As far as Dropbox and some of the other cloud file shares, the biggest problem I have with those is you don't know where the server is, where that data is stored, so you don't know what government has access to that information. So we only keep ours on Microsoft servers, which I believe are hosted here and in Canada. Other questions? Yes? Okay. Yeah, so they're verifying that it's you. Um, so when you originally sign up, your computer is registered basically with Chase, so they know it's you from a PC that's been logged in before. So in order to register through another PC, they're basically giving you a second-factor authentication because they're texting you a code that you have to enter in. So it's a one-time two-factor authentication to get that computer registered. But that computer, once you do it, it's registered. So whoever has access to that thing could just use your user ID and password. So if you use public kiosk somewhere or whatever to check that, yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. Okay, that's good. Okay, yeah. So they don't have any password complexity requirements? Or you're saying that they don't have password complexity requirements at Chase? Okay, it's probably Cat 16. I can't answer for Chase, but I suspect it's because of the two-factor authentication that they have for when you originally sign up. BlackBerry server versus I don't have any opinion. Abdullah, do you have any opinion on that? I've had experience with the BlackBerry server one time, but I don't see them very often. I know there's issues with BlackBerry in other countries giving up their encryption technology so the governments could read the messages. I don't think that's happened in the U.S., but the NSA probably doesn't care because they probably do it anyway. This is Abdullah, everybody. He works with me. So if anybody was wondering why I asked him to talk. All right, one more question, if there is one, and then I've got to turn this back over. I think I went over my time. No more questions? Okay, thank you, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Neil Bhagat. I'm an attorney at Buckingham's Litigation and Employment Practice Group. I come to you from the perspective of we deal with these problems on the back end. What do you have to do when you have a data breach, and what preventative steps could you have taken in the first instance? I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of state and federal law, and then we're going to talk about best practices from the lawyer's perspective. We're going to focus on Ohio's data breach law, which basically says personal information means an individual's name in combination with a social security number, driver's license number, or credit card number. How many of your businesses have some kind of personal information of a customer or an employee somewhere? It should be everybody, and usually I can tell by going to your personnel folder, because every employee, you likely have their social security number and you have their name linked to there. Under Ohio data breach law, you are obligated to keep this information protected, and the reason you need to keep it protected is if it's breached, it triggers a number of obligations you have under the law. And Brett has already identified for you what happens when we have a breach. So when that happens, that creates a 45-day timeline for you under Ohio's data breach law. What that means is you need to conduct a reasonable and prompt investigation, and you need to evaluate what your notification requirements are under law. What I mean by notification requirements are if you find out that there's a file with credit card information and the customer's name's linked to it, then you need to notify all those folks. If, like me, you were affected by the target data breach, you recall getting a piece of paper that says your information has been hacked. They're not doing that out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it because they're required under federal or state law. You too have those kind of obligations, and it doesn't matter if it's 3, 4, or 1,000 people. But what does matter is if it's over 1,000 people, that you need to report it to the consumer reporting agencies. And while it seems unlikely that more than 1,000 people may be affected, think of the instance where a file with stored payment information gets hacked for all of your customers for the last year. That may very well trigger an obligation under Ohio's notification requirements. Now, fortunately, there is not a private cause of action, and by that I mean somebody can't sue you if you get hacked. It doesn't mean you're in the clear, though. What we have here in Ohio is the Ohio Attorney General. They will receive a complaint of somebody, they say their information's been hacked, they think that this company did it. The Ohio Attorney General will look into it. Depending on what's happened, they will launch an investigation, and you will be subject to a civil monetary fine. Later in the presentation, we're going to talk about some steps you can take to hopefully mitigate or reduce that fine. And those are steps you have to take on the front end before any cyber breach happens. There are a number of federal laws. I'm not going to get into them, and we're only going to talk about a few of them, but the Graham-Leach Act is one of the big financial acts that we know from the last decade, and this primarily applies to financial institutions and banks. I don't think that's anyone here, but the main requirement is they need to have a data breach response plan, and they also need to have certain customer security protocols. The banks are usually pretty good about this. Again, there's no private cause of action for that. We also have HIPAA. Is anyone in the medical space here dealing with protected health information? Okay, we have a few. Obviously, you know that HIPAA is very strict. There are requirements you have to take. This changes every year. It's a very specialized area of law, and this is something that we recommend an audit be conducted by somebody who knows what they're doing in HIPAA compliance. Broadest authority comes to the Federal Trade Commission, and basically any of the number of federal laws that provide data security requirements allow the FTC to prosecute a claim underneath it if a violation happens. Practically speaking, you're looking at violations where thousands of people are affected, your Targets, your Home Depot. Not to say a complaint can't be made if something is egregious, and not to say a civil monetary penalty won't happen if you haven't taken the right steps or responded appropriately, including as to notification requirements under the law. So let's talk about best practices, because I think that's the focus of what we can help you with. First step to take in analyzing what kind of risk you have is to analyze what data is being collected. And I'm not talking about, my focus is on employees, but also think about your customers. Generally, we have social security information, contact information, health, genetic information for purposes of insurance, financial information, bank account numbers so you can do direct deposit, background check. This is where you're requiring employees tell you everything for the past 10 years, addresses, social security, former names, and obviously personnel records. The most important consideration in why you have this data is, what are you using it for? Why do you collect this data? And this is where you ask either HR or if it's you who takes in this data, what's the purpose? If the reason you ask for a social security number is so that you can run a background check, that makes sense. If you don't have an answer to why you collect social security information and it's because we've always done it, that's not a good answer. We don't want to have that information in your personnel file. So take a look at what you're collecting. Make sure we're using it for a practical reason. The second point here, holding on to information as long as you have it, ties into your record retention policy. Often, we'll go to employers and we'll see that they have personnel files for employees that haven't worked there in 10 years. Why? What do you need that for? If there's no practical reason to keep that, then don't keep that information, because all that matters is when the data breach happens, then you've got another set of employees that you have to notify in the instance of a data breach. So make sure you look at your record retention policy. Make sure you're getting rid of files as you need to. And the third point ties into don't collecting personal information that you don't need. It will not help you, and it can hurt you down the line. Brett has already addressed some of the steps, security measures, and authentication, and these are some basic points, which are restrict access. And from the employment lawyer's perspective, what we're looking at with the personnel file is make sure not everyone at the company can access the personnel file, especially if it's stored on a shared drive. These need to be secured. These need to be password protected. If you have hard copy files, make sure you're locking the file cabinet. Believe me, that doesn't always happen. Make sure you're limiting administrative access. And with personnel files, make sure that health and genetic information is stored in a separate file. You have an obligation under the law to make sure that is not in the same personnel file that anyone can access. Only the very highest individuals at the HR level should be able to access the medical information on an as-needed basis. Talked about risk to data, cyber attacks, theft of records and hardware. But the part I want to focus on is employee negligence and error. This is the number one area that we get brought in. And the most common example that we see at least once or twice a year is employee X's car got broken into. Laptop was sitting on the back seat. Laptop has files relating to the company's information. You need to take preventative steps via your policies to make sure that employees know, and I know it's common sense, but it's better to have it in writing and to train them on it, to not keep their laptops in the back seat. You need to make sure that employees are incorporating the password mechanisms that Brett talked about. You need to make sure that they're following the protocols you've put in place. You can spend the money to put the protocols in place, but if they're not being implemented, it means very little. Best practices. There's a couple policies, and I know the employment lawyers are always talking about policies, but give it some thought, see how it fits in. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but some of these may be applicable. Information security policy. This is incorporating much of what Brett talked about, informal writing, and then not only that, training your employees on using this on a consistent basis. This may also mean third-party vendors you utilize are agreeing to abide by your security protocols. Bring your own device policy. Remote access, cell phone, if they have access to your computer system, you need to make sure security mechanisms apply to the bring your own device, the cell phone, and so forth. IT resources and communication. Obviously, make sure your folks, your employees, are not surfing the internet or not using the internet in an inappropriate fashion. That can lead to the sites where we do see the malware. Putting in the restrictions in the first place. It may not stop them, but it may provide you some cover at the back end. Obviously, confidentiality and trade secret policies. This sort of reinforces that customers' information is important, that employees need to take steps to protect it. You obviously need to have these protocols to train your employees on implementing these policies. And on the back end, have an incident response plan. And this may be something you do in consultation with your counsel, which Justin will talk about, and with your cybersecurity expert to make sure when this incident happens that you respond quickly. I can't tell you the number of the times that we learn about the data breach 3 days or 4 days before the 45-day window. It is very difficult for us to do an investigation, talk to the right people, figure out who we have to notify, talk to the consumer reporting agency, and make sure that you don't violate the law. As soon as you find out, bring in counsel, talk to your experts so we can figure out a plan that reduces the exposure of a civil penalty on the back end. These steps, while look, you can't stop cyber breaches from happening. What you can do is you can train your folks on it, and when the Attorney General or the FTC investigates you, if, God forbid, that happens, you can point out this wasn't willful, this wasn't negligence. We took steps to prevent it. Sometimes stuff happens, but at least we took the steps, and that may result in a reduction of the fine or penalty, depending on the facts. I'll take questions after Justin speaks. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you a little bit this morning about everybody's favorite subject, insurance, and how to use your lawyer, your other favorite person in the world, to help protect your company and make sure that when these kind of things happen, you're prepared and you're protected. Usually I show... Yeah, Barry. That's right, we do. And usually at this point in the presentation, I do, and forgive me, I may step away from the microphone a little bit. I'll try and project. I'm getting over, I lost my voice over the weekend, so I'll project as best I can. Usually at this point, I show a little clip from the movie Office Space. Has anybody here ever seen the movie Office Space? Okay, it came out about 15 years ago, and it's a comedy. It's about these three disgruntled software engineers, two of them who had just gotten laid off, and the other one who is just sick of his job and decides not to come anymore, but yet they still pay him and give him a promotion. But anyway, they decide that they're so disgruntled that they just want to rip off their company. So they come up with this software, because that's what they do. They upload it into their company's mainframe database, and it infects their accounting system, and it takes all of the rounding of quarters and percentages of cents and filters them into another bank account, a few cents here at a time. And, over a period of years, they think, okay, we'll make, a few $1,000s off of this. Well, somebody made a math mistake, and they ended up siphoning off a few $100,000 in about 2 days. So, obviously, somebody at the company caught that. I'm not going to ruin the end of the movie for you, but there's a clip that I would normally show you, but for time, I won't go through that. But that's an example of somebody who can get into your system from the inside. Brett has talked about people who can get into your system from the outside. Here's another example. CEO of Providence Hotels, nice hotel chain, emailed his controller one day asking him to wire him a very specific sum of money. Yep. Yep. And unfortunately, this happens more often than not. We have a client here who I'm currently working with a situation where something like this happened. They get an email. The company gets an email that they believe is legitimate that says, wire me a sum of money. Here is the banking information. Here are the wire instructions. Looks legitimate. Most of the time, if you're a controller, you're a CFO of a company, you control the funds, and your CEO sends you an email saying do something, you do it. So this gentleman did it. And these hackers swiped almost $50,000 from this company in one simple transaction. How did they do it? Providence Hotel's website listed all of its executives on its website, right there. Had their titles, had their phone numbers, had their email addresses. So the hackers took this information, cloned an email account, and added one letter to the email address of the CEO. So instead of gsonland@providencehotels.com, they cloned an email account that was gsonland@providenceihotel.com. Small I, nobody noticed it, fake account, sent the money, fake wiring instructions, sent right to these hackers' bank accounts. It happens more often than you would believe. And that's a very common way to have it happen. How many of you deal with overseas vendors? Some of you deal with overseas vendors. How often do they just email you invoices rather than sending them in the mail? Those invoices have wire instructions on them. Do your people have procedures in place to double check those wire instructions? If they're a different account than what you're used to wiring information to, that should be a red flag. It happens more often than you might think. So what happens when this occurs? We've talked about the Target breach. It happened to Home Depot. It happened to J.P. Morgan Chase. 83 million households and businesses were involved in the breach with J.P. Morgan Chase. We talked about the healthcare.gov hack. It happened to the FBI. It happened to the United States Postal Service. This happens all over the place. Okay? It's much more common than you might think. A report in 2014 talked about the average cost to a company of a data breach, $3.5 million. $145 per record, whether it's an employee record or whether it's some other type of, in the health industry, whether it's a medical record. There are consumer costs. There are litigation costs. There are other costs involved. It's something that every business now needs to be aware of. It is a literal and virtual Pandora's box of issues. I could sit here and talk for an hour about this. I'm going to go through the highlights as best I can. So who are you going to call? No, not the Ghostbusters. You're going to call your two favorite people in the world, your lawyer and your insurance broker. I hope they're your two favorite people in the world. First step, if you ever suspect a data breach or you believe that you are vulnerable, retain outside counsel. This will allow you to maintain the confidentiality of your information and protect your proprietary data. Your outside counsel will help you coordinate and respond and investigate data breaches. We will retain experts such as Brett so that we keep all of this investigation confidential. We keep it privileged. If you do it yourself, you retain somebody like Brett. You don't do it at the request of counsel. You run the risk, if there is a breach in the future and there is litigation over it, that party can obtain all of that data, the results of that investigation. However, if you hire counsel, counsel hires the expert performs the report and the investigation at the request of counsel, that information can be protected and is not subject typically to discovery in subsequent litigation. It also insulates your business people and your in-house counsel. If you have in-house counsel, a lot of you may, a lot of their communication may be privileged, some of it is not. If it is for pure business purposes and it is not for purposes of providing legal advice, most third parties, if you're ever involved in litigation, will argue that those type of communications are not privileged. All right? Only if your in-house counsel is involved in providing you with legal advice are those communications privileged. Another good reason to bring in outside counsel. It will help protect all of those communications. Talked about the attorney-client privilege. The work product doctrine is very important. You'll see these terms. Okay? We are asking you to perform this investigation in anticipation of litigation. Brings it under that cloak of protection. Or we are retaining, or we are asking you to provide this information to this third party at my direction, at the direction of counsel. Okay? Those magic words that you will see in communications from your lawyer help keep this information confidential, help keep it privileged. If you're ever involved in subsequent litigation, that will withhold that information, in most cases, from being discovered in a lawsuit by an opposing party, which may be your insurance company, as we will talk about in a second. Good example, this happened in the Target data breach litigation. Target, as you can imagine, was involved in quite a bit of litigation over this. In that litigation, documents were requested from Target, which included all of their forensic investigation of that data breach. The judge in that case found that documents generated in that investigation that were ordered by outside counsel. So outside counsel retained the expert performed the investigation, all documents generated in that investigation were protected. The other side was not allowed to see them. However, before counsel got involved, Target did some of its own investigation, hired the same investigative firm, same type of investigation done, same type of documents generated. The judge found those were not protected, and the other side got to see them. Okay, very important we get counsel involved early on so we can maintain that cloak of protection. Let's let's talk a little bit now about the insurance aspect. I could stand up here, like I said, and talk about cyber insurance for a long time. There are a lot of aspects to it. I'm going to hit the high points, kind of the 30,000-foot view, and we'll take as many questions as we can. But this is something that is a very emerging area of the law, and unfortunately, there are not a whole lot of sure answers that I can give you. All the way back in 2003, the chairman of the Homeland Security Council is imploring the insurance industry to do something about this problem. It's easier said than done, but carriers must begin. Somehow it can be done. Cyber insurance is a relatively new product that has been on the marketplace about a decade or so. What is cyber insurance generally? It is an insurance product that is used to protect your business from internet-based risks and more generally risks relating to information technology infrastructure and activities. Very broad definition. It is typically excluded from your traditional commercial general liability policies. If you do not have a specific endorsement that relates to some type of cyber protection or data theft, and this happens to you and you attempt to make a claim under your CGL policy, even if you believe that there is something that might fit, good luck. Okay? More often than not, that claim is going to get denied. Right? Insurers nowadays are taking the position they won't even really look at your explanation. They will say, you didn't buy this coverage, therefore we're not going to cover it. Recent surveys, these were done last year. Demand for cyber insurance is increasing and the insurance market is responding by adding new capacity and new coverage. These forms, these endorsements, these policies are changing all the time. Cyber insurance market has grown to over $2 billion, which is expected to double by 2020. 61% of businesses surveyed now have cyber coverage. That means as we look around this room, it's a fair bet that at least 1 out of 3 of you do not have cyber insurance coverage. I'm not going to ask to poll you here, but it's a very good chance that 1 out of 3 of you at least do not have any type of cyber coverage on your insurance policies at this point. The cyber insurance market is disjointed, muddled by inconsistent policy forms. I spent some time going around to websites of half dozen different carriers. A lot of them will put sample policies on their websites. Every single one was different. And most of them were not even remotely similar. The terms used, the definitions used, the exclusions, everybody is different. Whereas in commercial general liability policies, homeowners policies, auto policies, a lot of this is standardized. Okay, it's one-stop shopping. You can just, you're searching for the best price. Okay, with a cyber insurance policy, so much of that is dependent on the carrier and what the carrier wants to cover. So we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes how important it is to talk to your insurance broker and make sure you find the right insurance product for you. The demand for cyber insurance is skyrocketing. The industry's attempt to understand a consumer's profile. Every business is different. That is leading to the development and the changing of these policies that are being offered. Okay, so what coverages generally can you buy? Okay, you can buy first-party coverage. First-party coverages protects you. It protects your company from data destruction, data breaches, extortion, theft, hacking of data. So damages that your company suffers, first-party coverage. Third-party coverage you can purchase. Errors and omissions policies. Third-party damages to your customers. Damage to your employees. Any third party that might claim it has been injured by a data breach. Failure to safeguard your data, or potentially defamation because of some sensitive information that comes out. Other benefits that you can purchase. A lot of times they will cover post-incident public relations, investigative expenses, or other type of security audits. Obviously, the more coverage you purchase, the greater your premium is going to be. So what's actually covered? We know we can purchase. What are they actually covering? It's a good question, and there's no real good answer for it right now. Insurance coverage law is, in areas other than cyber insurance, is relatively predictable. These policies are pretty much the same across the board. Courts often define what these terms mean. They define what the exclusions are. And there's a degree of predictability involved in insurance coverage litigation. If you come to me with a dispute over your CGL policy, over your homeowner's policy, and I look at your terms, I'm going to give you a pretty accurate prediction on how the carrier is going to look at that and whether you're likely to have coverage. With cyber insurance, there's very few cases that are out there right now that have interpreted the language in these policies and have not really set these standard terms yet. Okay? There are no standard policy forms that exist. Like I said, every carrier is a little bit different. No body of law defining what they are. There's a great deal of uncertainty over how courts are going to look at this. This is going to be greater developed, certainly, over the next 5 to 10 years. But right now, if you came to us and asked for an opinion on whether or not certain things would be covered if you had a data breach, it's going to be very hard for us to give you a certain response. We're going to give you the best response that we can based on what's out there, but understand this is a developing area of the law, which as a litigator, I also like, because a lot of times I'm not constrained by what's in the body of law right now. We can go out and we can take the policy that you have and make new and potentially creative arguments to try and bring that coverage and broaden that coverage for your company. Some emerging issues to consider. Will business interruption losses be covered? We don't know that right now. Okay, every time there's a data breach, there's a loss to your business. There's a loss of production. There's a loss of productability of your employees. Will those type of losses be covered? Typically, it's not set out that specifically in your policy. It's something that is going to be left to the courts to develop. Are cloud computing loss covered? Okay, Brett talked a lot about cloud computing. So many companies are doing that now. It's not specified in a lot of these policies. The litigation has not been out there over these type of losses yet, but it's something to consider. A lot of policies use the language reasonable data security measures. You will be covered for data breaches as a result of, or if you undertake reasonable data security measures. Okay, what does that mean? Courts are going to have to interpret what that language in a policy means. Neil talked about FTC investigations. If the FTC or any other regulatory agency comes calling, will those losses to your company potentially be covered? It's still an open issue. Will these policies cover breaches arising from mobile devices that may or may not be connected to your computer, to your company's computer network? Okay, another very important consideration. How will courts treat notice requirements? Under your policies, you're required to give timely, prompt notice of a loss. Sometimes we don't know about that. Sometimes we want to take measures internally to investigate before we turn this over to your insurance carrier. But before you turn it over and understand what type of coverage is out there, you want to investigate. How strict will these carriers be with notice requirements? How will the definition of a claim be treated? When will they consider it a claim? Okay, depends on the occurrence of the policy. You see those terms a lot. How are they going to be construed? All of these are important and emerging issues. So what can you do? In the last couple of minutes here, I'll go through this very quickly. Start with the basics. For your company, determine what costs and expenses you would like to have covered, and what types of incidents you want coverage for. Sit down with your management team, make a list. List your costs and the costs that others may attempt to claim from you as a result of this incident. Okay, once you've got these lists, find the right broker. Okay, your attorney might be able to help you find the right broker. And understand sometimes that might not be your normal insurance agent who you have your other policies with. Okay, this is a very new and emerging area of the law. Sometimes your regular broker doesn't have this type of knowledge. A good specialist broker will save you a lot of time and money. Okay, share those lists with your broker. Talk through what kind of coverage you want. He will help you understand the type of exclusions that are out there that may stop you from making a claim. And then pick the right carrier and the right insurance product. Your broker really can help you, guide you to the right carrier and the right product. You want to get, obviously, as with any policy, you want to get the most coverage you can for the right premium. You need to understand the limits of your coverage. You need to understand how detailed you want your policy to be. Sometimes the longer and more detailed it is, might not be as good for you. It's more ways for the carrier to be able to try and wiggle out of coverage. So summing up, no two businesses are the same when it comes to cyber risks. I took this quote from somebody within the insurance industry. It's key to understand the cyber risks for your particular business and ensure that your policy is tailored to mirror those risks. So sit down with your management team, figure out what risks your company potentially has, what costs you want to protect, talk to your lawyer, involve outside counsel, communicate with your insurance broker. If you don't have cyber coverage, I would strongly encourage you to think about it, talk to your broker, talk to your attorney about finding a way to make it something that's affordable for your company so you don't have to see this nice gentleman coming in and doing what he does within your walls. I thought I was going to be the one who scared you. I was scared by Brett. I don't know about anybody else. But with that, I thank you for your time. And Neil and I guess, or all three of us, will be happy to take any last questions that anybody has. Yes, sir.
Thank you again for coming. Just want to mention two quick things. First, there's a survey in your booklet. We'd appreciate if you fill that out and place it on the table over there. We want to hear about other topics that you would like to see in these presentations in the future. Second of all, obviously as attorneys, we have a lot of confidential data that we take very seriously in protecting. So Buckingham has formed a cybersecurity team that has addressed these issues with our own business, and we are prepared to help our clients as well in those areas. And these three gentlemen are definitely a part of that group and have that expertise. So we don't want to go over. If you guys need to leave, please feel free. And like they said, if you have other questions, we can go ahead and they'll try to give you answers. Thank you.